with no new set for completion. There are two important points, though, that can be made with respect to completion. At this point, all parties recognize the need to move the negotiations to a conclusion. And secondly, BHP is providing benefits to both Beardy's and Fish and Lake while the negotiations continue. And the chief mentioned that, and I'll speak to it a little more later. While the negotiations, the world has approval or the final decision on proceeding, and that decision is not now expected before the end of the year at the earliest. However, it is important to note that BHP has continued work on the mine site. They continue to drill the shaft, and so it is continuing to spend money on the project. At this point in time, I think their commitment approaches, well, I believe it's over $1 billion, and the more that they spend, the less likely it is that ultimately they would make a decision not to proceed. There is, however, a rumor, or it has been reported, that BHP is actually seeking a partner for the Jansen mine. I suspect, as the chief noted, because this is the biggest mine in the world once it's completed, BHP may be looking for a partner just simply to share the costs and the risks. In terms of the project itself, BHP Canada was instructed to change the project in the sense that they are now planning that they will move to full mine production much quicker than the original plan. And both of these developments has meant a delay in awarding some contracts that both Beardy's and Fish and Lake hope to get, and has meant that BHP is trying to cut back or limit expenditures. This may be one of the reasons why we've not been able to move the negotiations to a conclusion. I would like, though, to just talk a little bit about why we think there has been a delay in finalizing the agreement. One of them, as I've noted, is BHP's overall financial position and the change in the mine. Another reason may well be that how BHP is structured. When we started negotiations, we understood that the people at the negotiating table had the authority to make decisions and make commitments on behalf of BHP, as was effectively the case on our side of the table, because you have the chief from both of the First Nations as part of the negotiating committee, and you have other members of council. So that on our side of the table, if we say we'll do something, it's pretty well assured that it will be done. Whereas we've discovered that BHP appears to be structured in much the same way that Aboriginal and Northern Affairs Canada is structured. For even the simplest of decisions, they seem to have to go through a process of different levels of approval And if you see, and indeed we were given a chart showing how they make decisions, it's the most convoluted or bizarre looking thing that one can even imagine. However, the good news is that your negotiators have met with the two most senior officials in BHP in recent months, including Tim Cutt, who is the senior person in Canada. And these individuals have confirmed BHP's commitment to the process, and more recently they've become involved in the negotiations in an effort to move things forward. Another reason for the delay may be that BHP initially thought it could dictate positions to the two First Nations. I think instead it has found that there are a number of points of principle where BHP simply cannot dictate a result, and we have insisted that the outcome of the negotiations recognize principles that were included in the original terms of reference for the negotiations. And those principles include concepts of mutual respect, cooperation and collaboration, and open dialogue. In terms of where we're actually at, for the last number of weeks, and in fact months, we've been waiting for BHP to provide language on its proposals. And in fact, at the last formal negotiating session we had, one of the two senior BHP representatives came to the meeting to apologize to the First Nations for the delay in BHP's providing material. And in fact, they've since replaced the external lawyers that are working on the agreement. I want to speak now about a few of the key issues that are on the table and have been discussed. And I think those of you who were here when I spoke the last time may recall that I said that the two First Nations approached negotiations on the basis of building a long-term relationship with BHP, one that would last during the life of the mine and would provide benefits over that period, which is a period of 50 to 70 years. This concept is, I think, now understood and accepted by BHP. I'm not sure initially that they approached negotiations in that fashion, but as I said, I think it's now accepted by them that is really what you're all about, which is building a long-term relationship for the benefit of both the First Nations and BHP. Your approach, or the approach that we've taken at the bargaining table, is a little different than has been taken by some of the other First Nations in the area. Their approach has been more directed at what's referred to as a rights-based approach. They've come forward and said, we have certain rights and you have certain obligations, and therefore you should give us certain things. That hasn't worked particularly well, and by all accounts, our negotiations are further along than any of the other negotiations with First Nations. And certainly BHP appears to be more receptive to the concept that let's work together for the benefit of both than a concept which suggests that because we're here you have to give us certain things. We've now reached the point where we believe that concluding what is referred to as an opportunities agreement by BHP, or is most often referred to as a benefits agreement or project benefits agreement, can actually be used by BHP's Canadian officers to assist in obtaining approval from BHP's board of directors in Australia. As part of the negotiations, there are 4 or 5 areas that I will just touch on. The first, and I think that we've agreed to this concept, is that there will be preferred access to employment for members of both Beardy's and Fishing Lake. That will not be a preference during construction or early phases, but the language that we're talking about is an ongoing preference for employment opportunities. Part of BHP's commitment is to establish a community development fund that will allow, this is key, on an annual basis, access to money to support community projects. And as the chief indicated, BHP is providing some funding during the negotiations. The chief mentioned the figure of $175,000 approved to date. BHP's budget in the current year is actually $200,000 for each of the 2 First Nations. So I think that there's still an opportunity for some additional projects to be funded. Specific terms of the ongoing commitment are a key part of the negotiations. But one of the things that is likely to flow out of it is that BHP will fund a community development plan for each of the 2 First Nations. They will pay the cost of that plan, and then the resulting plan, which the First Nation will be responsible for developing the basis of an ongoing the 2 First Nations to develop businesses in a general way, and we're also speaking now wants to get the agreement wrapped up before the end of June. So my hope is that I'll be back again probably in the month of July, if not sooner, to talk about the final terms of an agreement. And at that time, we should be able to talk in some greater, or provide some greater details. That's it, Chief, but I've got, certainly I will answer any questions that people may have.
Any questions for Tom? I guess no questions is a good sign, Tom. Well, one question. Sorry?
You're saying somebody had to take the fall. What's taking the fall?
You gonna come to the mic, Shirley?
Oh, no, I think what I said was